There is a specific kind of person who never gets angry, who is patient in situations where patience seems impossible, who absorbs what others cannot, who smooths over what others escalate, who finds a way to stay composed in circumstances that would produce rage in anyone watching from the outside. People around this person often describe them as calm, as mature, as emotionally stable, as someone who has somehow figured out what most people haven't, which is how to not be controlled by anger. And for a long time, perhaps a very long time, this person believes it too, that they are genuinely not an angry person, that the anger simply isn't there. What Jung understood, and what this person will eventually discover, usually in a moment they cannot control and did not see coming, is that the anger was always there. It did not disappear because it was not expressed. It went underground, into the body, into the patterns, into the slow accumulation of a pressure that has no release valve because the release valve was closed so early and so completely that the person forgot it existed. The calm is real. The composure is real. But beneath it, invisible and growing, is everything that was felt and not allowed. Every legitimate anger that was swallowed, every justifiable rage that was converted into accommodation, every moment of genuine fury that was translated, in real time, into something more acceptable. The question Jung would ask is not why this person is so calm. The question is what the calm is protecting and what it is costing. Because the suppression of anger is never free, it is always purchased at a price. And the price is paid in the currency of the things that repressed rage produces when it cannot find its natural expression. In the chronic tension that lives in the body without explanation. In the sudden, disproportionate eruptions that seem to come from nowhere. In the depression that is, in many cases, anger that has turned inward because outward was not permitted. In the relationships that feel subtly suffocating, the life that feels subtly wrong, the self that feels subtly absent, all of them downstream effects of an emotion that was present and was not allowed to be. This video is for the person who was taught, in one way or another, that their anger was not acceptable, that it was dangerous, or selfish, or unspiritual, or unbecoming, or simply too much for the people around them to handle. Jung did not see anger as a problem to be solved. He saw it as information, as a signal from the psyche about something that matters, something that has been violated, something that needs to change. What happens when that signal is systematically suppressed is the subject of this video. And what becomes possible when it is finally, honestly, consciously received is the part that most people don't expect. Anger does not get suppressed in a single dramatic decision. It gets buried slowly, through the accumulation of small moments in which the expression of anger produced consequences that felt more dangerous than the anger itself. The child whose anger was met with withdrawal, whose parent went cold or quiet or visibly hurt, learned that anger costs love and love was not negotiable. The child whose anger was met with escalation, whose parents' rage dwarfed their own and made it unsafe to be angry, learned that anger is a losing position, and losing was not survivable. The child whose anger was met with ridicule, who was told they were being dramatic, sensitive, too much, learned that anger is evidence of inadequacy, and inadequacy was not acceptable. Each of these lessons was learned in the body before it was learned in the mind. Picture a specific moment. A child of 8 is genuinely wronged by a sibling. Something taken, something broken, something unfair in a way that any adult looking at the situation objectively would recognize as genuinely unfair. The child feels the anger rise. Clear, justified, proportionate. And then they look at the room they are in, at the people in it, at the unspoken rules of how emotion works in this specific family. And they swallow it. Not consciously. Not with a plan. The anger simply goes somewhere else because forward was not available. That child will spend decades not understanding why certain situations produce a tightness in their chest that has no name and no clear origin. Here is the counterintuitive part that Jung understood and most people miss. The most effectively buried anger is not the anger that was expressed and punished. It is the anger that was converted, transformed in real time into something the environment could accept. converted into helpfulness, into humor, into excessive understanding of the person who wronged you, into the ability to see every side of every situation so completely that your own side disappears. These conversions are sophisticated psychological maneuvers, and they happen so quickly and so automatically that the person performing them genuinely does not experience anger at all. They experience only the converted product, the generous interpretation, the patient response, the smile that arrived where the rage should have been. The shadow in Jung's understanding is the repository of everything that was real but unacceptable, and suppressed anger is one of the heaviest and most volatile contents the shadow can carry. The shadow does not simply store what is placed in it, it accumulates charge. Every new moment of suppression adds to what is already there, not as discrete memories but as pressure, as a growing autonomy, as a force that increasingly operates on its own, regardless of what the conscious self prefers. The person who has spent years converting anger into acceptance is not in control of what they have built in the shadow. They are in a temporary and increasingly unstable management relationship with it, and at some point, the timing determined by the shadow, not the conscious self, that management fails. The eruption never actually comes from nowhere. That is the first thing to understand about it. It comes from everywhere, from the accumulated pressure of every moment of suppression that preceded it. But because the accumulation happened underground, invisible even to the person carrying it, the eruption appears, from both inside and outside, to be wildly disproportionate to its immediate trigger. The rage that surfaces in response to a small inconvenience, a comment that seemed harmless, a minor frustration, a situation that objectively should not produce this level of response, is not about the immediate trigger. The trigger is simply the final increment of pressure that the containment system could not hold. The straw, not the weight. Picture this scene exactly. A person who has been patient and accommodating for months, in a relationship, at work, in a family dynamic, finally reaches a moment where something small happens. Someone takes the last of something. Someone makes an offhand comment. Someone does the thing they always do that this person has always absorbed without complaint, and something breaks. Not gradually, all at once. The response is enormous, confusing to everyone present, including the person producing it, and followed almost immediately by shame, by the familiar feeling that confirmed what was always suspected, that the anger was dangerous, that it couldn't be trusted, that it was better kept underground. And so it goes back, deeper this time, more compressed, ready to surface again. Jung would recognize in this cycle one of the most precise illustrations of how the shadow operates. The conscious suppression that feeds the unconscious accumulation, the unconscious accumulation that produces the uncontrolled eruption, the uncontrolled eruption that generates the shame that justifies further suppression. The cycle is self-reinforcing and self-perpetuating. Each eruption becomes evidence to the suppressing person that the anger was right to be suppressed, that it is indeed dangerous, indeed disproportionate, indeed something that cannot be trusted with expression. What they cannot see, from inside the cycle, is that the danger and the disproportionality are products of the suppression itself, not of the anger. There is another form the eruption takes that is less visible, but equally significant. The passive form, the anger that does not explode but leaks, the withdrawal that is slightly too prolonged, the forgetting that happens reliably around certain people, the lateness that occurs specifically when the person being met has done something the suppressing self cannot acknowledge being angry about, the subtle sabotage, the chronic unavailability, the relationship that slowly suffocates under the weight of what is never said. These passive expressions are not chosen. They are the shadow finding the only outlets available when the direct ones are sealed. And they tend to be more damaging to relationships than the eruptions, precisely because they are deniable, because the person producing them genuinely does not know they are angry. Jung understood anger not as a malfunction but as a messenger, as the psyche's signal that something of genuine importance has been violated. Every anger, at its source before the suppression and conversion begin, is pointing at something real. A boundary that was crossed, a need that was dismissed, a value that was disrespected, a self that was diminished. The anger is not the problem. The anger is the information. And the suppression of the anger does not resolve the underlying violation. It simply silences the signal while the violation continues. The person who cannot feel anger also cannot feel with full clarity where their genuine boundaries are, cannot know with reliable precision what they actually need, cannot identify before it becomes a crisis, when a relationship or a situation has become genuinely harmful. There is a specific poverty that develops in the psychology of a person who has suppressed anger long enough, a poverty of self-knowledge that is directly proportional to how thoroughly the anger was buried, because anger in its healthy form is one of the primary instruments through which the self knows itself, through which it knows what it values, what it will not accept, where it ends, and another person begins. The person without access to their anger is a person without reliable access to their own edges, who tends to discover their limits only when they have been exceeded by so much that the crossing cannot be ignored, and who therefore tends to live in a chronic state of overextension that they cannot clearly name because they cannot clearly feel the signal that names it. Here is the counterintuitive truth that Jung's framework produces about anger. The people who are most frightened of their own anger are frequently the ones with the most legitimate anger to feel. Picture two people in the same difficult situation, one who grew up in an environment where anger was safe to express, one who grew up in an environment where it was not. The first person feels the anger, expresses it proportionately, and moves on. The second person feels the anger, immediately converts it, and carries the unexpressed energy forward. 20 years later, the first person has a functional relationship with anger. The second person has a shadow full of it and a terror of what it might mean to let it surface. The suppression is proportional to the original pressure, which means the people walking around most carefully managing their composure are frequently the people who have the most real, legitimate, unprocessed anger underneath it. The fear is not irrational. It was created by genuine experience. But the experience that created it was then, and the life being lived now is now. What the anger is actually saying, beneath the specific content of any particular eruption or suppression, is something consistent and important. I am here. I have limits. Something happened that mattered to me. I need something to be different. These are not dangerous messages. They are the basic communications of a self that is present and alive. The problem is not that the self is sending them. The problem is that an entire psychological system was built over years of genuine necessity to intercept these messages before they could be delivered, and that system is now operating in contexts where its original justification no longer applies. Jung understood decades before the neuroscience existed to confirm it, that what the psyche cannot process consciously will be processed by the body. Repressed anger does not simply wait patiently in the shadow for the moment it will be acknowledged. It lives in the musculature, in the chronic tensions, in the patterns of holding and bracing that the body develops to contain what the mind has decided cannot be expressed. The jaw that is perpetually set, the shoulders that never fully drop, the chest that is slightly, permanently tight, the gut that is chronically unsettled in social situations where something is happening that the conscious self will not acknowledge as wrong. These are not random physical complaints. They are the body's version of the anger that has no other place to go. Picture a specific body, a person who has been in a meeting for 2 hours in which they have been spoken over repeatedly, their contributions minimized, their ideas appropriated by a louder colleague, their expertise casually dismissed by someone with less of it. They leave the meeting having said nothing about any of this. They are, by their own assessment, fine, but their neck is tight in a way it wasn't this morning. Their hands are slightly cold. They will have a headache by 4 o'clock that they will attribute to screen time. Their body registered every moment of the meeting that their conscious self decided not to register. The anger had nowhere to go except in. The relationship between repressed anger and depression is one of the most clinically significant and most consistently under-acknowledged connections in psychology. The traditional formulation, that depression is anger turned inward, is, in the Jungian framework, not a metaphor, but a description of a mechanism. The energy of anger that cannot move outward toward the source of the violation reverses direction. It moves against the self. It becomes self-criticism, self-doubt, the persistent low-level conviction that the problem is you, your sensitivity, your weakness, your inability to simply let things go. This is not depression as a chemical imbalance, though the chemistry is involved. It is depression as the accumulated weight of a self that has been consistently choosing its own diminishment over the risk of its own anger. The body always knows before the mind catches up. And learning to read the body's signals, the specific tensions, the specific exhaustions, the specific ways that certain people and certain situations produce physical responses that the conscious self is not acknowledging, is one of the most direct paths into the suppressed anger that the mind has learned to root around. The tightness in the chest before a conversation with a specific person is not anxiety about the conversation. It is anger about the relationship that the system has not yet permitted itself to name. Learning to ask, what is this body sensation telling me, rather than how do I make this body sensation stop, is the beginning of a very different relationship with the anger that has been living there all along. Repressed anger does not stay internal. It shapes every relationship the suppressing person has, invisibly, structurally, in ways that are felt by everyone involved but rarely named accurately by anyone. The person who cannot express anger directly tends to select relationships that either replicate the original dynamic that made anger impossible, relationships with people who are volatile or fragile or in positions of authority, or relationships in which they assume the role of the patient, the accommodating, the one who doesn't need much. Both of these selections are driven by the same unconscious logic. They recreate the conditions under which the anger was originally suppressed, which feels familiar, which feels like the only available version of relationship. Here is what the other person in these relationships experiences, and what they almost never understand clearly enough to name. They feel the absence of something, a fullness that should be there and isn't, the sense that they are relating to someone who is present in some ways but absent in others, specifically absent in the dimension of genuine response. Because anger, in its healthy form, is one of the primary vehicles of genuine presence. When someone does something that genuinely affects you and you can let it affect you, when your response is real rather than managed, the other person feels met. When the response is consistently managed, consistently accommodating, consistently refusing to register impact, the other person feels, subtly, and without being able to explain it, like they are talking to a wall. A very pleasant wall, but a wall. The specific crisis that repressed anger creates in intimate relationships tends to arrive in a predictable form. The sudden revelation, after years of apparent contentment, that enormous amounts of resentment have been building underground. The partner who says, "I had no idea you felt this way," and means it, because the signals that would have indicated it were systematically suppressed in real time. The friendship that ends not with a conversation, but with a withdrawal that the withdrawing person cannot fully explain, because they cannot access the anger that is driving it. The family relationship that has been sustained for decades by a person who has been swallowing their reality in every encounter, and who one day simply stops coming, not in anger they can name, but in an exhaustion that is anger's final form. Jung would say that the most honest thing a person with suppressed anger can do for their relationships is to become willing to disappoint the people in them, not as cruelty, as presence. The person who cannot risk disappointing is the person who cannot be genuinely present, because genuine presence includes the moments when what you actually think and feel and need is different from what the other person would prefer. The willingness to be seen in your anger, to say this is not okay with me, or I need something different, or that hurt, is not the threat to the relationship that the suppressing system always predicted. In most relationships worth having, it is the thing that makes the relationship real. And developing that willingness, learning to offer genuine response rather than managed response, is precisely what the work of integration requires. Integrating repressed anger does not mean expressing every anger that was previously suppressed. This is the misunderstanding that makes the work feel more dangerous than it is. The fear that acknowledging the anger means unleashing it, that opening the valve means flooding everything. Jung's framework is more precise than that. Integration means developing a conscious relationship with the anger, learning to feel it, to identify what it is pointing at, and to choose a response that honors both the information the anger carries and the context in which it is operating. This is a very different process from either suppression or explosion. It requires something that neither of those requires: genuine presence with the emotion before deciding what to do with it. The first step is the step that feels most impossible to a person who has spent years not feeling anger, simply allowing it to be felt. Not acted on, not expressed. Felt. This means creating the internal conditions in which anger can surface without immediately being converted. Sitting with the discomfort of the feeling, noticing where it lives in the body, staying with it long enough to hear what it is saying, before the conversion system kicks in and produces the familiar, generous interpretation, the understanding response, the smile. This is not a comfortable practice. For a person who learned very early that anger was dangerous, the feeling of anger, even alone, even in complete safety, can produce immediate anxiety. The work is in learning to stay anyway. The second step is developing the capacity to express anger proportionately and in real time, not the accumulated pressure of years of suppression, but the clean anger of the present moment, delivered at the scale that the present moment actually warrants. This is the skill that was never developed because the original environment did not permit its development. And like any undeveloped skill, it tends to be clumsy at first. The first times a person with deeply suppressed anger tries to express anger directly, it often comes out wrong. Too small, too apologetic, or suddenly too large, the current anger pulling the historical pressure with it. This is not failure. This is the process. The skill develops through practice in the same way every other skill develops. The third step, and the one that produces the most lasting change, is the retrospective work of identifying what the suppressed anger was actually protecting. Here is what this looks like concretely. You think of a specific relationship or situation where you consistently swallowed your response, where you consistently produced the generous interpretation instead of the genuine one. And you ask, without judgment and without needing to act on the answer, what was I actually feeling? What was actually not okay? What did I actually need that I never asked for? You are not looking for someone to blame. You are looking for the information that was sent and intercepted, the signal that never arrived at its destination. Each time you can retrieve that information and let it be what it was, the structure that required the suppression loosens slightly. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the direction of a self that trusts its own experience enough to let it be real. What becomes available when the anger is finally integrated is not what most people expect. The expectation, shaped by years of believing anger was dangerous, is that allowing the anger would produce chaos, would damage relationships, would reveal something about the self that was better kept hidden. What actually becomes available is the opposite of chaos. It is clarity. The person who has developed a genuine relationship with their anger knows, with a precision that was not previously available to them, where their edges are, what they will and will not accept, what they need, what matters enough to protect. These are not aggressive capacities. They are the basic instruments of a self that is present, that has limits, that occupies its own life rather than perpetually negotiating around the edges of it. There is also something that happens in the body when the anger is no longer being suppressed, a quality of relaxation that is different from the absence of tension. It is the relaxation of a system that no longer has to work so hard to contain what is pressing against it. The jaw that drops, the shoulders that finally come down, the chest that opens, the gut that settles. These are not metaphors. They are the physical consequences of a psychological system that no longer requires the enormous ongoing effort of managing what was being managed. The body, when it no longer has to carry the anger, returns to something closer to its natural state. And that return is felt as a kind of aliveness that the suppressing person had forgotten was possible. Jung believed that the parts of the self that are most suppressed contain, paradoxically, the greatest vitality. The shadow is not only dark, it is also alive. More alive in many cases than the persona that was built to conceal it. The anger that has been underground for years is not only rage. It is the energy of a self that knows what it values, that responds to violation, that is present enough to be affected by what happens to it. Integrating the anger does not just resolve the problem of the eruptions and the passive leakage and the depression and the body symptoms. It returns something that was taken underground with the anger, the vitality, the presence, the capacity to be genuinely moved by the life that is being lived. If you recognized your pattern in this video, if the calm you have always been credited for has begun to feel less like peace and more like pressure, then the anger you have been carrying is not your enemy. It is the most honest part of you, the part that registered what happened, that knew what was not okay. That has been waiting, with a patience it was never asked to have for you to be ready to hear it. You don't have to express it all at once. You don't have to confront anyone. You only have to begin, to let it be felt, to let it speak, to take seriously what it has been trying to tell you. The life on the other side of that conversation with yourself is not an angrier life. It is a more honest one,